One line. That's all it took. I released the latest Hatspack update, and out of everything in the release notes, one line got more attention than anything else. Daybreak removed. Not Atmosphere. Not Hekate. Not SysPatch. Daybreak. And almost immediately, people started asking, why? How do we update firmware now? What replaces Daybreak? Did Hatspack lose functionality? The answer is no. Nothing was removed from the user experience. In fact, firmware management is now more capable than before. But before we talk about updating firmware, let's talk about why this happened in the first place. Because I think a lot of people completely misunderstood what changed. And more importantly, I think a lot of people misunderstood what Daybreak actually is. Let's start with a simple question. What exactly is Daybreak? And surprisingly, a lot of people don't know the answer. Many users think Daybreak is its own standalone project, its own standalone application, something completely separate from Atmosphere. But that's not actually true. Daybreak is part of Atmosphere. It's built together with Atmosphere. It's distributed together with Atmosphere. And if you go searching for a standalone Daybreak repository, you're not going to find one. It's simply one component inside the larger Atmosphere ecosystem. Now, why does that matter? Because when people saw Daybreak removed in the changelog, some reacted as if a critical piece of the switch scene had suddenly disappeared. But that's not what happened. Atmosphere didn't change. Daybreak didn't stop working. Nothing broke. The only thing that changed was the workflow. And that's where the real story begins. Now let's answer the question everyone has been asking. Why remove Daybreak? The answer is actually very simple. I have nothing against Daybreak. It still works. It has served the Nintendo Switch community extremely well. This wasn't about replacing a bad application. It was about improving the workflow. Over time, HATS tools continued to grow. It could update Hatspack. It could download firmware directly from GitHub. It could install firmware. It could even install firmware from an existing package while completely offline. So eventually I asked myself, why am I asking users to launch another application just to perform one task? At some point, that extra step simply stopped making sense. So, let's see what that new workflow actually looks like. Before we begin, let's quickly identify which category you fall into. There are really only two starting points. The first group is already using Hatspack. If that's you, great. You don't need to reinstall anything. Of course, you're more than welcome to follow this manual installation guide if you want a completely fresh setup. However, if your goal is simply to update Hatspack, I'll show you how to do that automatically using HATS tools in the next chapter. The second group is coming from another custom firmware setup. Or maybe you're installing Hatspack for the very first time. If that's you, this is the workflow you should follow. In this chapter, I'll show you exactly how to download Hatspack manually and install it step by step. Let's begin. First, open the Hatspack GitHub repository. Go to the releases section and always download the latest zip release available. Once it's downloaded, extract the zip file. Eventually, you'll simply copy the extracted files to your Switch SD card. However, there are a few important things you should know before doing that. Keep your Nintendo folder. Keep your EMUMMC folder if you're using one. Everything else related to your previous custom firmware can safely be replaced with the latest Hatspack. If you'd like to make a backup of your SD card before converting, go ahead. Copy everything somewhere safe before making any changes. In this demonstration, I'll remove everything except the Nintendo and EMUMMC folders. Next, extract the contents of the Hatspack zip directly to your SD card. Since I've already removed the previous custom firmware files, this is essentially a clean installation. If you'd like to keep additional homebrew or personal files, that's entirely up to you. This is simply the workflow I recommend when switching to Hatspack. That's it. Your manual installation is now complete. Go ahead and boot your console. In the next chapter, I'll show you something even easier. If you're already running Hatspack, you can update the entire pack directly from HATS tools without ever connecting your SD card to a PC. Before we jump into Chapter 4, I'd like to take a quick moment to mention something. If you're looking for a professionally customized Nintendo Switch and accessories, feel free to visit my store at www.sthetix.info. Everything you see there is personally selected, customized, tested, and supported by me. I'm not running a big company with multiple departments. It's just me, making sure every order is exactly the way I'd want to receive it myself. Need a larger SD card? Hall effect analog sticks? A different configuration? You can customize your order before it's shipped. I also ship worldwide using DHL and UPS, and if you're having trouble with payment, don't worry. There are multiple payment options available, and if you need help, just reach out to me directly. Oh, and one last thing. Every review you see on the website comes from a real customer who actually purchased from the store. No fake reviews, no paid testimonials, just honest feedback from people around the world. So if you're planning to buy a modded console anyway, take a look first. You might find exactly what you're looking for. Now, let's get back to the tutorial and look at the second workflow. This one is for users who are already running HatsPack. The best part is, you don't even need a PC. Before we begin, let's take a quick look at the current firmware versions. As you can see, both SYSMMC and EMUMMC are currently running firmware 22.00. Now, before touching any update process, I strongly recommend making a backup. From Hekate, go to Tools, then select Backup EMMC. For SYSMMC, backup both EMMC Boot 0 and Boot 1 and EMMC Raw GPP. If you're using EMUMMC, tap the text at the bottom that says SDEMUMMC Raw Partition. Then backup SDEMUMMC Boot 0 and Boot 1 and SDEMUMMC Raw GPP as well. I'm not going to show the full backup process here because it can take a while, but make sure you do it if your data matters to you. Also make sure your SD card has enough free space. Once you're ready, go back to the Hekate home screen, select Launch, then boot into SYSMMC CFW. After you're on the home menu, open the album. Then launch Hats Tools. Here you can see this is still the older Hats Tools interface. It still has the original 6 icons. The newer version already has more features, and that's exactly why we're updating it. Now go to Advanced Options. Scroll down until you see the Install options. There are several modes here. Overwrite only copies the new files over the existing files. It does not delete old folders first. Replace Atmosphere deletes the old Atmosphere folder, then installs the new Atmosphere folder from HatsPack. Replace Atmosphere and Bootloader replaces both Atmosphere and Bootloader. And replace Atmosphere, Bootloader and Switch is the cleanest option. This replaces the main custom firmware folders and helps avoid duplicate or outdated homebrew files. Personally, this is the option I recommend if you want a cleaner HatsPack environment, but the final choice is yours. Pick the mode that best fits your setup. After that, go back to Fetch HatsPack. Select the latest HatsPack from the top of the list. You will see a reminder telling you to make sure your SD card is backed up. If you're ready, choose Continue. Hats Tools will now download the latest HatsPack. Just wait until the download is complete. At the end of the process, you'll see an option to launch the Hats installer. Select Launch. The console will reboot into payload mode and start the Hats installer automatically. Just let the process finish. When it's done, the console will return to Hekate, or in this case, Hekatos. You may notice the name has changed. This is not just random rebranding. This is to make it clear that this is an unofficial fork of Hekate. So if there is an issue specific to this modified version, it should not be reported to the official Hekate project. It should be treated as a Hekatos issue. That's simply being fair to the upstream project. And that's it. HatsPack is now updated. Next, we can move on to updating SYSMMC. Now that HatsPack has been updated, it's time to update SYSMMC. There are several ways to do this. However, for this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate the workflow I recommend for the vast majority of users. Simply boot into semi-stock. Why semi-stock? Because many users around the world are using Pick-a-Fly. Updating SYSMMC through Nintendo is the most universal workflow and helps avoid many of the fuse-related issues that often come up with offline SYSMMC updates. Once you're in semi-stock, open System Settings. Navigate to System Update. Then perform an official online update through Nintendo. Before you continue, there's one very important thing to understand. This workflow assumes that your SYSMMC is clean. If you've previously installed pirated content, modified your SYSMMC, or used it for activities that could leave traces, do not follow this online update method. Connecting a compromised SYSMMC to Nintendo servers carries a significant risk of your console being banned. So before updating online, make sure your SYSMMC is clean and has only been used as intended. If you're unsure, stop here and verify your setup first. After the update is complete, the console will reboot back to Hekatos. With SYSMMC fully updated, we are now ready to update EMUMMC. Now let's update EMUMMC. Back in Hekatos, select Launch, then boot into EMUMMC. Once you're at the home menu, open the album and launch HATS Tools. From the main menu, select Update Firmware. Before we continue, I'd like to point out something important. Updating your firmware is never mandatory. That applies to both SYSMMC and EMUMMC. If everything is working perfectly, there's absolutely nothing wrong with staying on your current firmware. Most people update because a newer game requires it, or simply because they prefer running the latest version. Ultimately, it's your console, your choice. Just don't tell yourself that it updated by accident. Firmware doesn't update itself. Your finger made the decision before your brain did. So update because you actually want to, not because you think you have to. With that said, if you'd like to update your EMUMMC, let's continue. Select the latest firmware from the top of the list. If you'd rather use a firmware package that's already stored on your SD card, simply press the Y to switch to local mode. This works much like the traditional Daybreak workflow. Whether you choose the online or local method is entirely up to you. Once you've selected your firmware, HATS Tools will first validate the firmware package. If you're using the online method, HATS Tools will automatically download the firmware directly from GitHub and immediately begin the installation. If you're using the local method, the installation will begin after the validation process completes. Just let the process finish. Once the download and validation process is complete, select Install. HATS Tools will then begin the firmware installation. Just let the installation finish. When it's done, select Reboot. Your console will reboot back into Hekatos. And that's it. The update process is now complete. You've updated HATS Pack. You've updated your firmware. And everything was done through a single workflow using HATS Tools. I hope this also answers the question that started this video. Why remove Daybreak? Because firmware management no longer needed to live in a separate application. It now lives where it makes the most sense, inside HATS Tools. And before I wrap up this video, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. I know not everyone will agree with this change, and that's perfectly okay. Everyone has their own workflow. Everyone has their own preferences. If you still prefer using Daybreak, that's entirely your choice. Daybreak is still part of Atmosphere. You can simply get it from the official Atmosphere release if that's the workflow you prefer. HATS Pack just doesn't include it anymore. Not because Daybreak stopped working, not because it's a bad application, but because HATS Pack has evolved to a different workflow. What matters most isn't that everyone follows the exact same process. What matters is that people keep creating, keep improving, and keep sharing ideas that help the community move forward. Every innovation starts with someone willing to challenge what's familiar. Some ideas will succeed, some won't. But no one should ever be discouraged from experimenting, building, and trying to make something better. Because that's how progress happens. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video not only showed you how to update HATS Pack, but also gave you a different perspective. Life isn't static. Neither is software. Neither are workflows. Everything evolves. Maybe our way of thinking should evolve too. I'll see you in the next video.